So I walked next door to the kid and I said, if you had one question to ask Coach Leach, what would you ask? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, you got about 15 minutes. You better think about it. Mike called back, talked to that guy for over 2.5 hours on my phone. And the kid was walking around. He would just take the phone and go, it's Mike Leach.
You're listening to the Good for Business podcast, where we feature interviews, tips, and tricks from owners, operators, and innovators throughout Mississippi and around the world. And now, your host, Colin Krieger. Hey guys, welcome to the show today. It's your host, Colin Krieger. I'm here with one of my pals and world-renowned home inspector to the stars, Paul Picard. How you doing today, bud?
Doing fine. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it being here.
Well, we're going to start now on our episode 1003, technically episode 3. And go ahead and give me your pedigree information, who you are, where you're from, family, that sort of thing.
So, Colin, I am from South Louisiana, a little town called Pride, and it's just about 15 miles north of Baton Rouge in the Sticks. My family is from South Louisiana. My dad was half French, and that's where he got the name. My family goes back to New Roads and Opelousas, and in that area, my mother was from Central Louisiana and from Jackson. I grew up down there. I ended up in Mississippi in 1987, came through Starkville on my way to Tennessee, stopped overnight, and stayed. Walked on the campus at Mississippi State and said, I think this is where I want to be.
All right. You're living there now, wife and kids?
Yes, wife, been married 36 years. She's from Central California. Brought her here from California. She had never been in the South. She cried for the first 3 years, but then she got acclimated. Have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters and a son from 33 years old to 29, and 3 grandsons.
Well, there you go. I'm going to tell all y'all, Paul has a leg up today because unlike other guests, Paul brought some gumbo, some homemade turkey andouille gumbo, and he greased the wheels a little. So this podcast goes for 3 or 4 hours with multiple commercial interruptions promoting Paul's Home Inspection Company. Please understand and forgive me. And we topped it off with some glass bottles of Barks root beer.
That's right.
Yeah, Penny Ridge Grocery, providers of glass bottles of Barks root beer and Cokes in 2024. That was a celebrity endorsement there for our friends over there. So as we always do in the multiple episodes, we're going to go straight to your origin story. Tell me to the origin story of what I view as little Paul and hip waders wrestling alligators in the swamps of Louisiana.
I wish it was that dramatic. So I grew up, my dad was a fireman, hauled me all around, grew up rabbit hunting with him and all of his buddies, and had a great life. Loved my dad. He spent a lot of time with me. When I was 8 years old, he came home one day and he said, son, you're going to start working a job. And he had contracted my labor out to one of the local widow ladies who lived about 3/4 of a mile down the road. And he told me I would now be cutting her grass. And that's how I started in my own business. My father wasn't going to pay. He didn't believe in allowances. So he got me a job. So at 8, I started doing that, and needed some extra money when I was around 10. Wanted to build the floating car that you see in the back of the comic books back then.
Yeah. Needed
a vacuum cleaner. My mother wasn't willing to let me have hers, so I needed a used vacuum cleaner. In the back of the same comic books, there was an ad for, I think it was called Olympic Business Club or something like that. You could sell greeting cards and stationery.
Oh, yeah, door to door.
That's right. So there was probably, we were pretty rural where I grew up. So I think there was about 20 houses down the local roads. I ordered the kit you sent off, and it came in 6 or 8, 10 weeks later. And I started walking door to door and selling cards and stationery. So, and this kind of supplemented. At this point, I didn't need my father as an agent anymore. I was contracting myself out to do busy work for people, clean out garages. I dug peanuts, I dug ditches, anything that would get me a buck.
There you go. And how old were you when you had your first paycheck job?
I got my first paycheck job at 14. My dad hooked me up in the summertime with an Atlas van line agent in Baton Rouge. So he was a career Baton Rouge firefighter. And at this time, he had got into the inspection bureau where they go and inspect the buildings and pass them all off. So he would drop me off every day. Had left the 4-hour shift scene, and he was into the straight days. And so he would drop me off at a moving company, and I would pack up. And back then, now this is 1980, so they didn't care about. I don't even know that they knew how old I was when they hired me. And one day I was sitting in there, and it was hard work packing these houses. And they said, we need someone to drive a pack truck to New Orleans. We were in Baton Rouge that day. And I'm like, hey man, I'll do that. I was 14, didn't have a driver's license. So I started driving a pack truck for them back and forth to, it wasn't the Ninth Ward, but it was in that area. They had a little warehouse, and I'd pick up all the moving supplies and bring them back to Baton Rouge and drop them off. And, one day they asked me for my scale tickets, and I told them I didn't have any because I didn't have a driver's license, so I had to run the scales every day. And they gave me a couple of days off. I was 15 by now, and I got a driver's license and started doing it legal. So that was my first paycheck job. It was also one of the few paycheck jobs that I've ever had.
Oh, well, and that's not a bad thing. No, I can remember I was telling my kids the other day, my second daughter's, Katie's, about to start driving. They were asking me how many cars I had and how I drove, and they were trying to do the math, and they're like, how are you driving for 5 years when you turned 18?
Right.
I'm like, oh, we just did. Part of that last generation that got to do a lot of cool things, especially in New Orleans. Like, you could go to a bar when you were 13. Right. I worked at a bar when I was 13 years old, and or bought cigarettes and stuff from my grandmother. And, that was neat that you got to drive, and there's a sense of empowerment in driving, but there's also the sense of empowerment of not knowing any better. Most successful businesses, I think, have been built off ignorance, that you're just like, oh, this is not a great idea.
I think ignorance is sometimes the key, because if you knew all the risk and you knew all the downfalls and you knew all the failures you were about to face, you probably would never do it.
Yeah, like being a home inspector in rural North Mississippi when there's already 20 established ones, or a realtor, or any other job. Can you talk about how that builds the perfect resume when you say not just what you're doing today, but your other businesses? Like, hey, I cleaned out garages, I was around houses, I had to go door to door to learn which is marketing, selling stuff, and then I had to work for somebody else to see the downfalls of working for other people. Like they didn't do a background check.
Right, that's right. So the first time I think I really learned the value of my time and realized that I was not going to enjoy working for other people was my junior year in high school. And I was playing football, and I wasn't smart enough for baseball or basketball. Football kind of fit it. And I took a job after school in the off season cleaning a concrete plant. And I think back then they were paying, this was in 82, they were paying probably, $2 an hour. And I made a deal. I said, look, I'll come in and clean it every day for like $35, but I want a flat fee. And what I'd figured out is once I got the place back in shape, I could come in and do it, for 4 hours a week instead of 8 or 10 hours a week. And I got myself fired. So they told me I was making more than the guys working in the plant. And I'm like, but I'm doing the work. And they thought that I was doing a great job, but they gave me a choice of either going back to $2 an hour or quitting. So I quit. But that was a great lesson, because I learned the value of my time, and that I could set that scale based on what I was willing to do and how hard I was willing to work. I was in marine fisheries for about 22 years. I built marine fish hatcheries and operated them. And I got to rub shoulders with some really good people in Baton Rouge, business people. Bill Wright and Percy Insurance, which is a legacy business. Spent a lot of time with them taking care of their stuff. And they would share insights with me that, you just couldn't get anywhere else. I remember one time I was told, they used to say I'd gag on a gnat. So I would get really caught up in these big things that there was no answer to. They say, look, you got to look past that. That's a little thing. I remember Mr. Wright told me one day, he said, Paul, it's not the big things that are going to affect your business. It's the $3 screwdriver that walks out of your shop every day. You got to count the little thing. You got to pay attention to that. And um, so that really fed into my personality. I like to do that.
Now, first of all, when I hear you talking about playing football,
Yep.
where were you in? Were you in Baton Rouge proper, West Baton Rouge?
Yeah, I was in Central, so just north.
Very similar to the Adam Sandler Waterboy football team. It is exactly what you're thinking, especially in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Exactly what you think of some country football. How did you end up? I was going to get to hatcheries. How do you go from concrete factories and driving trucks illegally to landing in a hatchery?
So I went on mission for our church for about 2 years. And when I was done with that, I moved back to the South. I was in California. I moved back to the South, and I was in psychology and took
real quick. So you were out on the West Coast and you took psychology. Is that how you tricked your wife to get over it?
So if you talk to Peggy, she'll tell you that we got together about 3 years after I got home. She'll tell you I promised to take her back when I graduated. And
it's not in writing. It's not in writing, Peggy.
We never did. And in fact, her parents moved to the South to be close. So they had children. They still have children in California, but they like the lifestyle here in the South. And I think, I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome or Peggy just really loves it, but she became the Southern girl. And with a name like Peggy Ann, everybody thought she was Southern and I was the transplant. But I was in psychology and I took a course in abnormal psych and realized I just could not pursue that field anymore. Went into forestry and needed a 2-hour class and took a 2-hour class in fisheries for the summer and just fell in love with aquaculture and fisheries and decided that's where I was going to go.
So paint this picture for folks. How big of a factory is a hatchery? Like, and where we are, where the podcast is coming from, it's catfish ponds.
That's right.
Yeah. And like in my mind, it's some huge industrial factory with fish everywhere.
So actually that's the scenario that I ended up in was the industrial plant. So catfish at that time you're making about $0.05 a pound off of. There was a new field coming into play, marine aquaculture, raising like red drum, pompano, cobia. They're in Australia was getting into it with two fish called barramundi and coral trout that I was really interested in. But in order to do this, so like your southern warm water marine species, they spawn in the fall and no other time. So we had to figure out, first of all, how to produce a consistent supply of eggs through the year. And yes, all this was done inside. So you had recirculating systems that would detoxify the water and run it back in. You could control the photo period and the temperature and trick the fish into thinking they were in the fall when they had no idea what was going on outside their little niche, their little pods, we call them. Met a really good friend called Rick Fernandez. That's his name. And Rick was early into this. He's from Texas, but he was in Lafourche. And they were growing the redfish in the cages out in the marsh. So Rick was kind of doing the outside stuff, and I was kind of doing the inside stuff, mainly the hatchery things to support businesses like his and produce the fingerlings. And we just collaborated a lot. And this marine aquaculture was in its infancy. There was, nobody knew what to do. My first job coming out of college was I was tasked by a company to figure out a way to do red drum in freshwater instead of saltwater, so we could break that dependency on the coastal areas. That guy. So that business, their business was in cycle time management. So managing the cycle time, like to get a new product like these phones from your mind to the consumer, 6 months or 8 months beating the next guy was huge. And that really, to me, that I was interested in that. And so I started trying to apply that to the fishery side. So I had a couple things fall into place, learning opportunities like that, and did that for about 22 years.
What's the biggest economic impact on that business? Like not as opposed to the general economy, or is it an oil well blowing up, or a hurricane, or what we're seeing now more of literally the foreign invasion of fish and
Yeah,
seafood?
I think there's a several factors. Uh, the price of proteins will affect the price that you pay for fish. For instance, red drum, that's a 3-year project from the time you spawn the egg to the time that you can sell that under normal conditions. Now we emphasized high intensity growing facilities that could cut that significantly, but the price of that protein, it's not a fish that you're going to sell to the masses. So you kind of got to know. Well, we sold to Paul Picard, we sold to Emerald a lot, those type of restaurants. So we were a little immune in the marine system from the catfish pressures. Catfish pressures is economy
It's like chicken
and
yeah.
imports. That's right. So it's a commodity, and in my mind, getting away from that commodity product was the smarter move. We had higher margins, but we also had significantly higher risk.
Can you speak at all right now? I didn't think we'd get to this, but can you speak at all of like the new labeling stuff in Mississippi? Do you think it's more important for people to know where their fish came because of toxins and quality, or is it a large part of that is more about just keeping the money in the United States?
I think it's fairness. I think it's the giving the consumer the information that they need to make an informed decision whether they want domestic or foreign product. I will break with some of my brethren in the aquaculture business and say that the facilities I worked with overseas, and I've been in Central America extensively, Canada, Australia, and Europe, working with facilities. If they're selling into the U.S. market, most of them are not trying to game it. They're producing a good product. So for me, it's more, hey, I want to support the U.S. market. But there are some bad players in every industry.
Yeah, everywhere. And I always say, like, part of the reason we stayed here is that I like to say after Katrina, the influence of Cajun culture kind of stops around Columbus, Mississippi.
Right.
Like our whole area, Starkville, Columbus, West Point, we can still there's still a sketchy roadside guy selling fish and crawfish and stuff. And every once in a while I've had an issue with one guy who's like, yeah, he's like, this is fresh shrimp from the Gulf. I'm like, it's not. Like it looks and smells like IQF shrimp. The season's been over for 2 months.
Right.
Like if you just been driving around in some water, and I'm like, it's still good, but just don't say it's that. I'm a big fan of river catfish, and you can't buy it, but I have to ask friends to trade for it and other stuff like that. I just like the dirty saltiness of it. There was a place in Metairie that served it up until a couple of years. I think it was Dots. I forget the name of it, but they served river catfish forever. They had the same problem. Couldn't buy it. You had to really go get it yourself, which isn't the best thing. So, so what's the first job outside once you escape the marine aquaculture?
So I left for a while at 44. I came back to grad school and thought I needed a few more letters after my name to give me some legitimacy. It was just kind of an ego thing. And while I was in my second year at Mississippi State, and my oldest daughter and I were in college at the same time, which was kind of fun. But my mother passed away unexpectedly, and I inherited my father. So he had some dementia and came to live with us. And so I ended up having to get out of the fisheries for about 3 years while he lived with us, and figured that would be my break. I thought I'd go back into extension when I finished my my degree, but it didn't work out. I wasn't able to devote the time to it that I needed to, and ended up dropping out and went back into fisheries for a few years. So my first real break where I walked away from the industry for the most part was about 10 years ago, when my wife said she had enough and, no more traveling, because I would be gone months and months at a time. And she said, no more of that.
Fish don't sleep.
Yeah, fish don't sleep. And when you got hatcheries in different parts of the world, you can't sleep either. And you can't be cranky when they call you at 3 a.m, because if they don't call you, you could lose $500,000 worth of fish with no insurance. There's no crop insurance for aquaculture. So I'll never forget, because she had said that before, and I knew she wouldn't. Yeah. She wouldn't do it, but she was I've never seen her that calm. And she went down to Texas. I was renovating a marine hatchery down there, the first redfish hatchery and grow out facility in the U.S. And it was about 40 years old. And
when was this? Because this was after the big redfish ban and all that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah. This was in 15.
Okay, so she came and she was done with you then.
Yeah, that's what she said. She said, the kids are gone and I'm next. And she was just so calm. I remember that really made an impression on me. She wasn't kidding. And she let me think about it and I moved back home.
Well, yeah.
So it didn't take long.
Well, a lot of entrepreneurs go through that same pressure. I've been there too, where you're so in deep. I'm going to touch on two things here. You're so deep in it, you can't see the effect on everybody else.
That's exactly right.
And I've had that, just like I'm going to say this almost every week. Like, generally men or women of a certain age have gone through several careers of varying degrees of success. And I've been in there where I'm so, like, when I started real estate, if anybody was watching, I was a wee bit obsessive for about 8 years. And then my wife's like, hey, calm down. Right. And I was the same way at Papa John's, where I was, staying till stores at 4 a.m. and I'm supposed to be the marketing guy and I'm sitting there making pizzas. I told somebody the story the other day of my wife and I. It took us 2.5, 3 years. My wife is a world champion level dough slapper when she was at Papa John's. Not like a theory or not maybe.
Right.
She's one of the fastest dough people in the country. That's how we met. And then she used to be my boss. I tell people, used to be my boss. But so for 3 years after I left Papa John's, if we went in that store and they were in the weeds we just jump in there and start making pizzas. And sometimes I'd be in a coat and tie doing it. So, can you speak on this part of what you mentioned? I've had the exact same problem. I was making a Trey Weigel from Papa John's Pizza was paying me a significant amount of money to run Papa John's Pizza. And I had to leave because of the time and everything. But the other part of it was, I did have some ego about wearing the apron.
Oh, absolutely.
And thought, like, my wife is going back to school now. She's going to be at State the same time my daughter's at Ole Miss and finish. And there is some imposter syndrome. And there's an entrepreneur in everybody, but in every successful entrepreneur, there's some imposter syndrome of I'm not that good at this and I just got lucky and maybe I need to get another skill set. And sometimes that's misdirected. Sometimes that's should get a bigger skill set or manage my fish hatchery life better and teach other people under me. And sometimes it's like, well, I got to get another degree or another letter. Can you speak to both of those? Both like, hey, I need a degree and you can't see things when you're in it because you're trying to perfect it.
Well, so I would notice a lot of my friends had their masters or PhDs. Of course, they weren't operating at the level I was operating. I'd already had success. Yeah. But I couldn't, I really started to obsess on that. I felt like the advanced degree would give me more legitimacy. I wouldn't be just a bachelor's. And I think ego has a big part to do with it as an entrepreneur. Of course, if you don't have an ego, you really won't put yourself out there to try things. So that I'm a lot older now. And a lot wiser, and that doesn't bother me. I am who I am now. Yeah. The degree wouldn't have added anything to my skill set.
Well, Scott Ferguson came in here last week, and he may be the biggest financial advisor in our region, and he was talking about he doesn't have a degree. Right. I didn't even know you could do that without a degree. Like I'm aware that you can somehow become an attorney or pass the bar without one. I didn't finish school either, but nobody asks about it. And then, but when I think of my backup job and I have to get a government job and it's required on there, we're at a tipping point in history. I've told my daughter, Allison, who's going to Ole Miss this year multiple times, like, this may be the worst time in history to go to college. It's going to be the most expensive and it could be the least valued degree because her peers and stuff are looking for what can you do, not what's written behind your name. And that isn't a discouragement to get a degree. If you had to say, pick a bucket, what should you do? I'd probably build an electrician business right now or something so you can, build the computers that feed our AI overlords. AI overlords, I love and support you. So when the robots are in charge, that might be what you want to do. But there's going to be a lot of sales jobs. There's a lot of hand-on mechanical jobs. And as I've told people here multiple times, and I say it almost every week again, it took us 10 years to get a Starbucks, including Starkville. Like, things do move a little slower. So, I don't want to discourage anybody from getting a degree, but I've told my kids, I'm like, you better pick something kind of specific. I was like, we don't necessarily need a basket weaving degree or anything like that. You need to pick something you can come out the gate running. Because otherwise, as they've learned, they were almost discouraged from 9 to 5 jobs because my daughter pet sat and babysat, and then farmed it out as if she's some mafia boss to her sister and keeps a cut of the money. And then the middle sister is washing cars and detailing cars for $100 a pop. So it's hard when they see that shiny object to say, we made Allison go work at Zachary's, because she had to be around that chaos to learn, to build the skill sets. Like you said, you've had a varying amount of jobs to get to the point where you are now. So what happens? You get out of hatcheries when she forces you off a hatchery.
So a lot of what we had developed our business in doing was I was doing consulting for business where I would do what's called ground truthing. So a lot of there became a big shift in investment for big public companies and private companies to buy these hatcheries and consolidate them. Again, they're looking toward the future when resources would be limited to grow protein. And because I grew up with a fireman dad, he had a construction background on the side.
As all firefighters do.
Yeah, as all firefighters do. They have 2, 3, or 4 jobs.
You want a shower built, go to Fire Station 1 if you want a shower.
Yeah, tremendously hardworking people. But I would go, and so if a company was making, let's say, a $150 million investment in a hatchery system or garage system, they needed someone who could go and inspect the facility, ground truth, make sure all the numbers are there. Are they feeding the right amount of feed to verify that the fish are there? Are the facilities there? Is electrical up to this? So I was doing inspections, just at a much higher level than home inspection. And, an inspection could take multiple years with multiple teams before we provide the report. So my wife, I give the home inspection business is really hers. Let's face it, I'm a contract home inspector. I work for First Choice Home Inspector, and the managing partner is Paul Picard. She came up with the idea, and I thought it was horrible. I said, no way, too much liability. And I hooked up with a friend of mine who was trying to sell me his home inspection business. Went out with him one day, and I was hooked. I loved it. So she came up with the name, the business. Again, like Scott, our card is green. I don't know how she came up with that, but it seems to work. The green is not a color you see a lot. That was brilliant. The name First Choice, that was brilliant. That's all her. So I developed the system to make sure we meet the state standard, but the business part was hers.
Well, I can say, how long have you been doing the home inspection?
10 years.
Okay, see? And he started right with me. I'm 10 years
yes.
and a few months into real estate still figuring it out, still learning stuff, still seeing stuff every single week. I like to say this about you, and it's public record among many realtors. I said, if you ask 100 realtors who the toughest home inspector is, probably 50 will pick Paul because they have their friends or somebody they may think is, and they can argue whether they're better or worse or whatever. But if you ask them who the meanest home inspector is, 100% of people will say Paul Picard is the meanest. Not in personality, just meaning that, like, I like to say for every 1,800 square foot house, there's 180 pages, and that's just documenting the house. Can you speak to how important a home inspection is for somebody buying a house? I have one of 762 clients on either side of the deal who didn't do home inspection, who wasn't a professional investor, but they usually, some of those skip them. And that one person I've talked to 6 times over the last 10 years and regrets it so much and can't even sell their house because the house was so bad. Can you speak to how honestly important you think, even if it's not you, that they use somebody?
I think the process is very important. And the state sets the standards. So there's actually a standard we're supposed to abide by. You check this, you check that, you don't check these other things. And if you follow that standard, if an inspector follows that standard, they're going to go through that house from the roof surface down to the foundation. The things that we uncover, to me as a consumer, I would want to know. And when I say we, I am talking about the industry now, not First Choice Home Inspection specifically, but as an industry. We see things every day that we think the consumer should at least know about before they invest their money in the house. We do hear sometimes people will call us and say, I just don't think I'm going to go ahead with the inspection. And you look at the fee that most inspectors charge versus the cost of one problem, that, and every inspector is going to find something.
Well, our market overall, if you combine the whole Golden Triangle, is every town USA. We are like the exact peg dollar, $246,000 that the national average
Yep.
is. And because of that, it's a market force, meaning that what y'all charge for home inspections between $350 and $700 is a market force of everybody getting together and like, well, this is a fair price. He's not
Correct.
too expensive. And then there are some people who are only worried about saving $50. But that same market force creates about the same amount of repairs on the other side, the same amount of requested repairs if there's not a hugely damaged roof or a bad air conditioner or bad foundation. If those things are good, normally people traditionally ask for, it turns out to be about the average what your fee is.
Right.
So it's a function of the marketplace and gets done. And I think you may see this a lot. The biggest challenge I think that we have in the United States and in our market is the difference in expectations from the buyer, the buyer's agent, the seller, and the seller's agent.
Correct.
Depending on which TV channel you're watching, it's the end of the world and everything's falling apart. And then the next day you'll hear me saying that Columbus was up 10% last year. And so you have buyers coming in and thinking I'm going to look at this 40-year-old house. And of course it's going to have some ungrounded outlets and some painted shut windows and stuff. And other people expect the house to be perfect. And that's where the realtors have to come and play and do it. And I know you do some prep when I send people to interview you, or you send them a sample report and go like, here's what it's going to look like. How important do you think that is in the process?
Oh, I think it's very important, setting these expectations so that people know that we're following a state standard, and not everything we find, not everything we have to document is going to be equal in concern. So painted shut windows in a house that's 60 or 80 years old, it's going to be on there, and it's going to be 8 pages of pictures, because we have to document it so that they understand it. One of the biggest claims against home inspectors that's successful is that we didn't make the consumer aware enough of what the problem was. So if they want to file a claim against a home inspector, the state of Mississippi legislature says they have 3 years to do it. That's a long time. And so they're sitting there looking at that stain in the ceiling, and after the second year, they say, I've heard it from my friends, my home inspector should have caught it. And then we're dealing with that. So we have to put that stain on there. Doesn't mean it's as important as a foundation that's settling and cracking. Every old house is going to have settlement. And if the customer is prepared for that, they're prepared for it. If they're not, maybe they should be looking at a different house.
Well, 3 years is a long time too, especially with foundations, because, correct me if I'm wrong, I know the drier it is, especially like in Starkville and Oktibbeha County, the worse it is for the soil over there. But when we're at world record breaking water table levels,
right,
we're having the same problem. These raised foundations in Columbus seem to be the wetter it is, they move. And the opposite, and for most traditional slabs, is I didn't think about that before. We had a drought, might have been in 18 or 19. It was pretty bad. And there were houses in Green Oaks and Starkville that I'd go 2 weeks apart, and I'm like, that wasn't there.
Yeah, you could stick your head in the crack and look around. They've gotten so big at that point. And that's why these reports, like our reports, are longer. We use a narrative form, which I prefer, but there's a lot of pictures, because when that customer calls us back in a year and says, hey, is this something that you should have caught? We can go back and actually look at that room, look at what the furniture was in that room, where it was placed, what we could see and couldn't see. We can look at that crack and we can say, this is what it was on this date. But as you see, it's gotten worse. So that documentation is very important, and letting the customer know that's why you're going to get a 180-page report.
And as far as from the pure business standpoint of building the business and keeping it, because there have been home inspectors come and go, just like realtors come and go, and chicken places in Columbus come and go. Have you had to spend any money on marketing, or are you just word of mouth, hand to hand? That's beautiful. So.
Yeah, we've been very lucky. We don't do the Facebook or anything like that. The main reason I don't do it personally is because we also have a high expectation for being discreet with the homes and disclosing anything in the home. So if I pop a picture up that shows you, hey, look at this horrible house, or even look at this great house, there's a chance that a realtor or a customer is going to see that.
Oh, you can tell I'm chomping at the bit now. I just keep wanting to jump in with stories about issues.
Yeah, go right ahead. You get to hear the side that I never get to hear. So.
Yeah, and we get calls like that constantly in real estate 6 months later, where it's just this, hey, I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, my air conditioning doesn't work.
Right.
And I'm like, it's been 6 months, man. Like, if it's been a day or two, you're going to help them. And it's a difficult discussion. Other life, family life and stuff. And I don't know how much you want to touch on this, and we can edit from right here on, but you were good friends with Coach at school. You had
Yes.
two different situations. So talk about Coach Leach and his passing. I know I was supposed to come and hang out with y'all a week before he passed away.
So Mike was one of the most unique individuals I've ever met, and I have met a lot of people. Mike just could walk into a room of people, and if you didn't know, I didn't know. I like football. I love football. But I really didn't follow any of the teams that Mike had coached at, and so I didn't realize I had a Hall of Fame coach.
So much so that they changed the rules to let him in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. So Mike first made an impression on me. I inspected his house, and he was a member of our church, so we kind of had that connection. I figured I would see him from time to time in church, but no coach. Sundays are hard for him. But Mike would call me at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. He knew because of the hatchery thing for 20 years, I don't usually go to sleep until around 2 o'clock, and I'm up by 6. Now I'll take a good nap on Sunday and catch up on that. But Mike knew that. And so Mike would go through this list of people, calling them every day. And I must have been the last one because, I was up. He'd say, I fool with Catahoula dogs. And he'd call, hey, I'm thinking about getting a dog. Well, tell me all about it. Or, where do you store your guns? Where do you store your ammo? And Mike was just, I don't think most of us had any idea of who he was and how connected he was. You can hear these stories everywhere. So I'll tell this story real quick because I think it will show the type of person Mike was. And I really miss him. But we were my wife and I camp a lot, and we were in Milton, Florida, outside of Pensacola, and a guy saw my Mike Leach pirate flag, young airman, and he was a forward air controller for the Special Forces in the Air Force. So he would go out and call in, the spookies and the stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, very important job. And he's like, "Oh man, do you know who Mike Leach is?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's the coach of our football team." And this kid rattled, I say kid, he was in his 30s. He rattled off every school, every record, everything Mike Leach had done. And he said, "I'm thinking about separating from the military, but I don't know what to do." He had a young family. He deployed a lot. Deployments were getting to be really hard. And he said, "Man, if I could just talk to Mike Leach, I think Mike could tell me what to do." And so the kid wandered off to his camper. It was about 3 down. And I went in and I called Mike. And I told Mike the story. And I said, "Mike, could you talk to this guy?" He was in Key West at his house. And he said, yeah, I'm boiling shrimp, but I know you're a coon ass. Tell me how to boil shrimp. So I had to walk him through that. And then he said, "Give me 15 minutes to eat these shrimp. I'm going to call you." So I walked next door to the kid and I said, "If you had one question to ask Coach Leach, what would you ask?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, you got about 15 minutes. You better think about it." Mike called back, talked to that guy for over 2.5 hours on my phone. And the kid was walking around. He would just take the phone and go, "It's Mike Leach." And after about an hour and a half, I had to follow him because it's my phone. So he's walking. His kids had gone to the pool. His wife was getting upset. She had gone to the pool. And he's like, "I can't hang up on Coach." And he said, "Coach, I don't want to do this, but I got to go. This is Paul's business phone, and it keeps beeping." And Mike told him, he said, "Don't worry about that. Let's just finish this." But who does that? I mean, the guy had no free time, no personal time, hardly any personal space, but he took over 2 hours to talk to this kid. After Mike's death, I ran into that kid again in Milton, and he talked about the impact that conversation had on him. I mean, who does that? So we lost a giant when we lost Mike.
Well, think about all the powers in the world that had to take you from a coon ass at a concrete factory to fisherman to the middle of nowhere in Mississippi to run into a Hall of Fame coach who stopped here for a very short time to have that kind of impact. Like, that's the coolest part about here. It was a cool part about New Orleans, a cool part about business and life, that from one phone call or one thing, you can make a connection, and it might help you. I think most people who would have met Mike Leach at church would have handed him their business card and been like, this guy can get me some business, or this guy can do this, or this guy can do that. And even if they did, it can't think of the connection and impact that people have meant. Like my first two conversations here just on the podcast and this one today, I've had impact on people just because they realize, like, I don't have to be a billionaire to connect with somebody. I talked about on the first two podcasts about like the inventor of the trolling motor and other small business guys where there's gold in the hills, and we live upon acres of diamonds. That's the biblical verse. It goes in personal growth too, where there's diamonds in the fields here. You've made a successful job and a career in inspecting houses where, this is a smaller market. This is 1/100th of the Atlanta market. And home inspectors are having a tough time there. So you're doing good. Real quick, why don't you speak on your family involvement in the home inspection business?
So I inspect with my son, who is my youngest. He worked for me in the fisheries business. He was managing a farm at 18 years old, right? He left high school, graduated from high school at 3 p.m. and made a 13-hour drive to South Texas that night to manage a farm. He's grown up tough. He and I inspect together. He's a licensed inspector. He is certified at the master level. We go out every day and work together. We have our entire life. My oldest daughter worked for us for 5 years, worked with us until her business got too successful to fit both of them, and now she handles her business. My middle daughter worked for me or with me in the fisheries business, but she's a nurse prac and owns a small business in Louisiana. And of course, my wife makes sure all the bills are paid, everybody's paid us, and keeps us running in a straight line. So it is truly a family business. My son is buying the business out from me, and eventually the business will transition away from me, and he'll be the future.
Am I legally allowed to call him a coon ass or not?
You can call him a coon ass.
I just want to make sure. That's one of my favorite lines is your kids don't listen to you because they're too busy watching what you do. And I said that phrase to Jeffrey Rupp the other day. I was trying to get him on my podcast, former older, and I think about Jeffrey casually. And, I know if people have good kids. Trip Harson's a good example here, and some other people. I can tell by your kids almost everything I need to know about you. Like if you've got some hardworking kids, you've done a good job. So this is the time where you get to plug away. How do they reach you? What's a good way anybody and everyone can send you business? Because you can do inspections. Do you do commercial inspections? Do you do anything other than residential?
I do a little commercial inspection. I'll look at the job, and if I think it fits in with our scope, then I'm happy to do it. Some of them don't, and there's another inspector locally that really specializes in commercial. So most of the stuff will shift to him, unless it's like a lot of stuff on Main Street we're able to handle because it's not huge. Yeah. It's not going to knock us out for a week. But they can reach me at call my number and I'll answer.
What's your number?
662-312-6241.
I only know one of my daughter's phone numbers. So I don't know the rest. I barely remember my wife's, other than because it was close to the same as mine a long time ago. So anything else? Any fun advice or quips or anything before I let you go?
Well, I had a friend of mine tell me, run a little one-liner by me the other day that I think described me for most of my life. Hopefully I'm smarter than this now. But he said, if hard work made you the best, the donkey would be the king of the barnyard. And I wonder how long in my life I was the donkey, where just churning out things and working hard was the big thing. I think I've learned over my life that, as I think was said in one of your podcasts, money follows success. You don't build anything by just trying to chase the dollar or just working blindly. You have to have a plan. You have to have, I used to kind of laugh at people that would develop mission statements and all that for their business, till I realized that that's what should be front of the mind and keep you going. So, don't be the donkey of the barnyard, be the farmer.
Well, excellent, man. I was glad having you here, my friend. Paul Picard, First Choice Home Inspections. Thanks for coming on the Good for Business podcast.
Thank you, Colin. It was an honor. Appreciate it.